On today's episode of State of the Rockets, we're talking all things draft. We're talking all things Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, Bari and Tari, and TyTy Washington. And we're also going to talk a little bit about Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and the possibility of Nets implosion. So tune in. Welcome to a post-draft episode of State of the Rockets, the premier Houston Rockets podcast. As always, I am your host, Roosh Williams, the Mastodon. I am also host of the Noble and Roosh Show, hosted by Ball is Life. So many hosts. The Noble and Roosh Show on Ball is Life, one of the only podcasts in the game bringing you exclusive access and interviews to players, journalists, bloggers, and all that. And as always, I'm joined by none other than my co-host, who's in his Jordan flu game right now, Mr. Jackson Gatlin. Jackson, how you living? How you feeling? I hope you're still with us.
Oh, I'm barely hanging on by a thread, but my guy, this Rockets draft has given me new life. Even though I probably sound like crap right now, I'm hanging in there just for this show because I want to talk about everything that took place on draft night with the Houston Rockets with you. This is going to be such a fun episode. But yes, I am your other host, Jackson Gatlin. I also host Locked on Rockets, the only podcast covering the Houston Rockets 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. The host of Locked on NBA Mondays, and I'm the founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at JT Gatlin. You can follow the Mastodon himself at Roosh Williams, who didn't even do a great job plugging himself. He talked about exclusive interviews. You want to talk about an exclusive interview? This man just interviewed Tari Eason over at the Noble and Roosh Show. That's Noble ampersand Roosh. Go check that out wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can go listen to that podcast. So be sure to go check out his interview with Tari Eason, the number 17th pick in the NBA draft, who the Rockets took. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about so much more. Roosh, this was a whirlwind of a draft night. Like from start, like the whiplash just within the first like 15 minutes of when the draft like started to just what happened and what transpired in those first 10, 15 minutes. Like walk me through your initial reactions to everything going on, the build up and everything that we experienced.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for plugging the interview with Tari. It was crazy, man, because I was talking to him, and in my head I was like, man, you might be a Rocket. And then I was like, nah, you're not. The perfect scenario that you hope for at like a pick as late as the 17th pick in the draft is so hard to pull off, and so hard for like everything to fall into place and then it works out, right? So I was thinking, there's no way we're gonna get Tari Eason at 17. Not even gonna delude myself into thinking so. And then we got him. And so I just told him, I was like, hey man, if you're a Rocket, like I'm from Houston. So, but regardless, man, so I'll rewind the clock back to the night before the draft. Okay. I'm on the West Coast. So
you're living in the past. Got it.
yeah. So I'm 2 hours behind everyone in Houston, right? So when that news dropped about the change of the Vegas odds, right? I got a message saying like, oh my God, look at the odds. This is crazy. And I looked at it and I was like, yo, every major sports book just massively shifted from Jabari being the consensus number one pick, like at minus, I don't know, 215 or 250, 190, whatever, to Banchero like leading the pack as the favorite. I mean, every major sports book, I think, except mybookie.com. And when that happens, that's not a fluke, generally speaking. I don't know that game like that, so maybe someone can drop a comment and school me. But I don't know. When a market moves like that, it usually means it's for real, right? Unless someone is just pulling off the best scam, of all time. And so I had convinced myself I was on Team Banchero, I was on the Paolo Peninsula, so to speak. And so Palace de la Paolo. And so, or Palacio. But anyway,
Stop with the alliteration, please. You're killing me worse than I'm already dying. Like, God.
Big ball and Banchero. But listen, so okay, back to the pod. So basically I was thinking like, man, I'm ready for Banchero. And I was thinking of basketball with Jalen Green and Paolo Banchero. How's that going to work? Brainstorming in my head. I mean, I'm going to Summer League in a couple weeks, and I was excited to see Banchero drop buckets, and you're just thinking about how is this thing going to work and come together. And so I got excited about it. And then all of a sudden, and I was initially Jabari Smith, which is the funny thing, right? And then I switched. And so I see the shift, and then you start tracking all the tweets, going through the timeline, messaging people like, "Yo, is this for real? Like, what do you think about this?" And basically came to the conclusion. I was about to fall asleep, and once that happened, I was wide awake, and I came to the conclusion that like, oh my God, I think Banchero is going to be gone, or we're going to trade up and go get him because that's our guy. And then I go to sleep and I wake up. I see the Woj tweet saying everything is still, expected to go as planned, as it's been, whatever he said. Jabari Smith, #1 to Orlando. Chet, #2 to OKC. And Paolo Banchero, #3 to the Rockets. And I saw that and I was like, all right, I trust Woj. I'm not going to go against Woj. And then, so the whole day I was ready for Banchero. I mean, I had some draft tweets ready to pump up Banchero. I was already tweeting things out like, yo, we're about to draft Paolo Banchero. And I was careful about it. I was like, the Rockets have the opportunity to potentially draft Paolo Banchero, which ended up being wise wording. And then, 8 minutes before the draft, Woj hits that tweet where he's like, I'm being told Paolo Banchero, could go #1 to the Orlando Magic. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me, right?
I even doubled down at that point. I was like, no. This feels like last minute posturing by like Orlando to maybe like try and extract like an extra asset or something.
Right.
And yeah,
I threw a couple bucks on Banchero to go #1 because on my bookie, because they were the only one that still had the odds of him not going #1, and I won a couple bucks there. So anyway, so that happens, and then, like at that moment, my heart dropped. I was like, yo, this is curveball. I don't know what's about to happen, and the uncertainty of not knowing what was going to happen with that #3 pick, how it was going to go down, if we're going to trade up and forfeit some of the prized assets we've accumulated, all of that. And so I got super nervous. And then they took his ass. They took Banchero. And so to walk you through that, I'm thinking, oh my God. Then the Chris Haynes tweet saying OKC is going to take Jabari Smith. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. We're about to get Chet. And I'm cool with Chet. And I've been saying I'm cool with any of the top 3. But to go from, man, Banchero is going to be special. I'm so excited for this big 2 with Jalen Green, to immediately then going back to where I initially was, which was, well, Jabari's skill set immediately transfers, high floor, fits very well with what we've got going on, keeps Şengün on the court. We'll talk all about this. And then all of a sudden to be like, oh, Chet, okay. The biggest question mark, in my opinion, of the big 3. Like, that was a roller coaster. And then it ends up being Jabari. And then I'm still trying to process it, waiting to see if there's a trade, and after the fact, like the Rockets and Magic announced they're swapping the rights and the blah, blah, blah. None of that. And then it's like, okay, it's Jabari Smith. All right, it's Jabari Smith. Cool. Hell yeah, it's Jabari Smith, right? And then we get Tari Eason, and then they pull off the Christian Wood trade. They finalize it, move down 3 spots, take TyTy Washington at 29, which is great value, in my opinion.
Worth noting, trade's still not finalized. We actually don't know what that permutation is going to look like. We know that in some capacity, right, it could be one of 2 options. It could be the Rockets have expanded the initial, framework of the trade to include Minnesota in that framework, or it could be 2 subsequent trades being made, like one after another, where they do the trade with Dallas first, and then subsequently the Rockets make the trade, or Minnesota makes the trade with the Rockets, and then Minnesota makes the trade with the Mavericks as well. I think it's more so the former, where they loop Minnesota into the actual trade of the original framework, so it becomes a 3-team deal, because I think that makes more sense based on the wording of it, because otherwise, I would
like it to be a part of the Christian Wood trade, because I like the fact that it's now, hey, Christian Wood for a $4 million TPE, a first-round pick, TyTy Washington, and 2 second-round picks. Like, that's, I mean, compared to 4 months ago, where people were trying to get us to trade him for like Kendrick Nunn and what's his name, Talen Horton-Tucker, or like a 2nd-round pick or whatever. Like, huge win. Anyway, so that's how it went. That was my perspective of like the roller coaster that it was. And let's get to the players, right? I know that Jabari Smith was your guy. You never wavered. I did. Jabari Smith was my guy. I went to, Palacio de Paolo, and and now I'm back on in the Jabari jungle, ready to mingle and all that. So I'll tee it up and I'll let you take it off. Talk to me. I know he's your guy. How do you feel?
I mean, like you said, man, it was an absolute roller coaster going through those first few minutes of the draft, just with all the buildup, the craziness from the previous 24 hours, leading up to it, the Vegas odds shifting, all of that. And I just kept doubling, tripling, quadrupling down, thinking, no, this is just a smokescreen. This is, the Magic and the Thunder trying to get cute, trying to play the Rockets into giving up some additional capital, whatever. I was like, no, I'm content. Like, the Rockets are going to get their guy at number 3. And I wasn't, again, I never shifted from the standpoint of like Paolo's number 1 on my board now. I shifted from the standpoint of Jabari Smith Jr. is now out of reach. And so what is the best option for the Rockets at number 3? And so the way my board did wind up shifting was I realized that Paolo Banchero made more sense at 3 than Jaden Ivey did. And originally, right, I started warming up to the idea of Paolo Banchero. And like you, I attached myself to the idea of what he would look like with this Rockets team, right? What would he look like playing alongside Jalen Green? How could he and Alperen Sengun potentially fit? And then all of that just immediately was washed away the moment he was taken number 1 overall. There was that initial shock factor, and then the initial just absolute elation at the fact that the Jabari Smith Jr. dream was still alive and well. But that was also compounded by the fact that even though I had Chet number 2 on my board, I still think he is absolutely the riskiest prospect at the top, and I kind of didn't want the Rockets to deal with that, especially given how high the floor is for Banchero and how high the floor will be for Jabari. I was sitting there thinking, I don't want him to take Chet now. Like, don't let Chet fall to 3 and be the one that gets picked. So when OKC came away with the pick of Chet Holmgren, I knew it was going to happen. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it to be official. We get the tweets coming in, and I was over the moon, man. I'm still over the moon. I'm like trucking along. I'm going through my flu game right now, and I have all the energy and life in the world because the Rockets absolutely crushed it in this draft. When you look, if you were bought in on Paolo Banchero as a Rockets fan, you absolutely should have been, for good reason. Paolo Banchero is going to be an elite player. He's an elite prospect. But with what Jabari brings to the table, the skills that he immediately has are so translatable to the NBA. You're talking a hyper elite 3-point shooter, a guy who's going to go get you buckets from anywhere on the floor offensively. There's question marks about his ability to finish on the interior. Sure. There's question marks about all the 3 prospects and, different holes that they have in their respective games. But talking about the way that he shoots, how he gets his shots, and how he's going to be able to be plugged in seamlessly to the Rockets offense with 2, arguably 3 high-level shot creators in Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Kevin Porter Jr. This kid is going to absolutely feast on the Houston Rockets offensively. And that's just with his current skill set. Like, that doesn't even, include the idea of him developing more to his offensive game than he already has in his bag right now. And then defensively, this guy is going to be a top-tier, versatile, switchable defender, a guy who can guard a variety of positions. Basically, right, he's a supersized wing, 6'10", great frame, great ability to stay with smaller, faster players, probably can guard some smaller, some bigger guards, but like the idea of selling him, right? He's not going to be the same as Paolo Banchero. You're not going to give him the rock and say, all right, go get us some buckets, right? Go generate offense. But he's basically, to me, like a 6'10" Klay Thompson. He's going to be out there getting buckets left and right. His job is just to shoot the basketball offensively the moment he touches it. If an NBA defense gives him even just an inch of space, he's going to go out there and make them pay. And I do think one thing that we didn't see enough of at Auburn is the guards really didn't help him a lot at Auburn. He had to work really hard, especially the back half of the season, to generate any and all offense for that team. When he's got guys like Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun to feed off of, with the Rockets, life is going to be so easy for him to where he just makes buckets. He shoots wide open shots. He cuts off, backdoor cuts here and there, coming off pin downs, whatever. I mean, this guy just got drafted to an absolutely perfect situation here in Houston.
Yeah, so let's get to the basketball of it. So Banchero, I was high on Banchero because he can create, and I was like I said, I was excited for the idea of a big 2 with him and Jalen. Like, you get 2 potential superstar players or potential star players, and you're cooking, right? You can then build around them as you please. I was worried because a lot of people don't think that Banchero and Sengun would fit, especially defensively. And I love Sengun, and I think he still has a long way to grow. So I just didn't like the idea of having to give up on Sengun early, but I was ready to do it if Banchero could really, if he can really fulfill like the talent that he's billed to have. So it's like a really flexible kind of moving scale, because there's a lot of different outcomes and a lot of it depends on different things, right? And also Banchero then complicates having Banchero, Tate, Şengün together, so you have to start like picking and choosing, and you start to see a world where like you're gonna have to move a lot of the people on the team outside of like your big two to make everything work and fit. So it was kind of like a high upside play, an uncertain play, didn't know how it was going to finish or end, but felt like you're getting the best player available, right? I mean, nearly 7-foot player that can create, score, do all that, and has the tools to become a solid defensive player, like Jason Tatum. People say whatever, but that aside, like I said, uncertain, and so because of that uncertainty, you could definitely end up in a scenario where things don't work out, and then you get in this awkward stage where you have to move a player like that. Whatever. That's Paolo. With Jabari, like you said, he plugs right in. He complements Şengün well. He brings something to this team that I don't think. I think I was saying this in the space, but the best shooters the Rockets have had since, like, let's say the James Harden era, since James Harden was on the team, Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, and Garrison Matthews, maybe, and Ben McLemore. Can you think of anyone else?
Not off the top of my head, no. I think that unless Trevor Ariza had a year where he was like shooting close, like better than usual, because Trevor was a respectable 3-point shooter, but I wouldn't say great 3-point shooter.
I can't remember what Ryan Anderson shot. I think he was close to 40%. Eric Gordon, as a Houston Rocket, shot 37.2% when he first came to Houston, and he never shot higher than that until this last season, where he shot 41.2%, right? So the point is, the Rockets have been desperate for like just a dead-eye sniper for years. It's the thing that they never were able to put around James Harden, and they haven't had shooters like that over the last 2 seasons. I mean, quite frankly, it's the reason Garrison Matthews was so useful, because he was able to stand out wherever and just catch and shoot, even though his defense, was more of a liability, right? But the point is, they've needed shooting and they've needed defense, and Jabari Smith does both of those things immediately, and so far from what we can tell, at an elite level. I kind of disagree a little bit with the Klay Thompson, 6'10" Klay Thompson. I previously made that argument, but after looking into it more, I'm not saying he won't be. I just think we shouldn't underestimate how difficult it is to do what Klay Thompson does, catching and shooting off of movement, pump faking, leaning to the side, just the crazy shots he hits, being clutch, that intangible type thing. So Jabari could be that. But all in all, man, I think his floor, and I said this, and I didn't notice until before we were doing this pod, that Kevin O'Connor also said this. So I'd like to pat myself on the back for being correct about this, because a few people questioned it when I said it. But I think his floor is somewhat of like a taller Harrison Barnes, who is a very good player. Like, don't get it twisted. Harrison Barnes has had seasons averaging 18 plus, shooting 39, 40% from 3, playing very solid defense. I think Jabari's better defensively, or at least has potential to be better defensively, especially on the perimeter. But that's, I think, his floor. And then, if he hits a ceiling and he learns how to dribble and create, like, who knows? I mean, you could be dealing with a Kawhi Leonard. I've heard people say KD. I don't agree with that, because KD is just in a whole different tier, and it's not even a
KD's a complete anomaly. Like, we've never seen that level of fluidity from like a 7-footer before. He's a 7-footer with guard skills, and that just doesn't grow on trees.
Right. By the way, drop a comment and let us know how you feel about the draft and how you feel about the trade, because we'd love to hear from you. But so maybe you hit like a Kawhi level. One thing I was thinking with regard to his handle, because a lot of people, that's the knock, is, oh man, his handle is very questionable. And that's a very hard thing to develop, right, at this stage in your career. Number one, I agree with that, by the way, because it's true, right? Like, I think the hardest thing to develop once you're at this age, playing for this long at the NBA level, is legitimate vision, like just having court vision, because that's one of those things that comes in you. But I think the second hardest thing is probably learning how to have like a really legitimate solid handle from the wing, driving from the perimeter, breaking down defenders, driving and kicking, not like a basic handle, but like a legit handle, right? It's just hard to develop later in your career if you never had to get one and grow your body into one. So, but if he gets that, I think he could get it on a level like Kawhi, who can really get you on the elbow, get in a triple threat, make moves, operate accordingly. So that's the upside. But I was going to say, Jaylen Brown can't dribble very well, right? We saw all the comments during the finals. Jaylen Brown dribbles like a linebacker or like a football player at LA Fitness, or whatever, right? But how effective can Jaylen Brown be, despite the fact that his handle is not good? And Jabari's a better shooter, and Jabari's probably a better defender. We'll see how it translates to the NBA level. So I'm not saying he's Jaylen Brown. I'm just saying take that piece of his game, the fact that Jaylen Brown can't dribble, and then look at how he's been able to perform and get a team to the finals. And then consider Jabari. And so Jabari next to Jalen Green. I mean, look, man, I'm just envisioning a world where and by the way, he can pull up off the dribble. Like he goes in transition and just goes straight into, like, no hesitation, straight into a shot, lifts, boom, bucket. And
Yeah,
it's pretty.
because
Like,
on this point, just about his dribble, right before we get to the bigger grand scope vision, I love the comp to Kawhi, because Kawhi was a guy who, right, was really rough around the edges offensively when he came into the league, right? I mean, he came in as a defensive type of guy and really fleshed out his offense over years, right? Working with the San Antonio Spurs shooting coach, like all of that, developing his entire offensive repertoire that we now see. And Kawhi is definitely a guy who plays, like, he plays bigger than his position, right? Like, we see Kawhi, he's a three, a wing, whatever you want to call him, but he's got like those, like, back to the basket kind of post moves, like use his size and like bully you down low kind of thing if it's a mismatch. He's not afraid to do that, get you, 15 to 18 feet out, face you up, do whatever. And while Kawhi's developed a nicer dribble over the years, I think I want to push back on Jabari not having any semblance of a handle, right? Because I think that's what gets overblown with people, is they say, oh, well, he can't handle it all. He can't. No, he's got like a relatively, like, he's got an effective enough dribble to where when you couple that with his size and with his high shooting form, like the release point on his shot, nobody's contesting that. Like, he doesn't need, my biggest thing for Jabari has been, he doesn't need like a Kyrie Irving-esque dribble to be effective. Like, it'd be insane if he could develop that, but I'm not even asking for that. Like, all he needs to be able to do is get to the spot on the floor that he wants to get to and then elevate. And that's it. And he's already shown an ability to do that with Auburn, where he can drive left or right side of the floor, left or right hand, and get to a spot that he wants to get to and then elevate and hit shots. Because again, it's damn near impossible to block a 6'10 shooter who's that great at pulling up from wherever he wants to on the floor. And then the way he elevates above a defender, it's game over at that point. So I do think developing a better handle will help and round out his overall game. But I do think there's just it's been a bit overblown to this point of like the lack of handle, so to speak. And I do think that ultimately, like, if that's the hang up on his game, like, I feel pretty confident in him being able to add a little bit more to that, to where it's, again, an effective handle. Doesn't have to be insanely flashy like some of the top tier guards in the league, but at least an effective handle like Kawhi has an effective handle at this point.
yeah, I mean, look, I don't disagree with you, but I think when people say handle, they're talking about, like, elite handles over the course of time, like guys that we think of as, boom, boom, like Hezzy
So
Twin.
sorry. So okay. So we've got this. So we've got basketball player and hooper versus ball handling and handle. Right. Is that what we're getting at right here?
I mean, in some ways, but like there's just levels to ball handling. That's all. I mean, and for Jabari to hit like the top tier of the level of ball handling is, unlikely. But I agree with you though, and that's what I'm illustrating, right? Is that like a guy like Kawhi, maybe even Paul George, although I think Paul George has a pretty decent handle, but Paul George is kind of somewhere in the middle there, where, if you can develop that type of handle with that quick trigger at his height, like, holy shit. He also does have that move. He can get you in a triple threat and shoot over the top. He can post up and give you like a bump and a step back and just shoot over the top. He can do all that. There's also the concerns about him finishing at the rim, which for those, I don't have an answer. The only thing I can think is that as he gets older and stronger, he'll just learn, you learn how to use your shoulder. You learn how to go up and under. You get foul calls in the NBA when you get fouled at the rim. I don't think he's like a very high jumper, but we'll see what happens. What I really like about him though is that he's known for being a hard worker, right? And I hate to sound, I guess I'm starting to sound like a freaking boomer, but we have been in a situation for the last couple of years where a lot of times we're like, man, national media hates Houston, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at it from the outside looking in, they just see, oh, Christian Wood and Kevin Porter Jr. left at halftime, and this team only suspended them for a game. This is not a serious team, blah, 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 blah. So Christian Wood is now out of the picture, and whether it was his fault or not, whether it was legitimate or not, he was perceived as like, a locker room issue type of guy. And so now the Rockets are only, and I think Jalen Green unfairly got lumped into that as well. And so now it's only Kevin Porter Jr. that is perceived to potentially be that type of personality. So you lose that with Christian Wood, which is a good thing. And you in his place, you add Jabari Smith, who's like, identity and calling card as a prospect. Part of it is hard worker, hard grinder. And he just turned 19 a month ago, May 13th. So he's going to be 19 for his entire rookie season. You know who else was 19 for their entire rookie season? Alperen Şengün. And you know who else is actually still 19 until I think July at some point? Alperen Şengün. So anyways, the point is he's young, man. It's not like he's like a 22-year-old kid finished product, right? That was a rookie season at Auburn. If you believe in his ability to grow and get better, and if you buy his work ethic and grind and his story, then I see no reason why he won't get there. But it sets a tone. And then for a guy like Jalen Green, who also prides himself on working hard, and a guy like Josh Christopher, who also prides himself on working hard, and a guy like someone we haven't talked about yet, Tari Eason, who also prides himself on working hard, that's how you build a culture. That's how you get guys competing against one another in a positive way. Like, hey, man, we're going to be that team, a young guns that will outwork you, right? And that's what we haven't seen from these Rockets in a couple of years. And then you add Jayshawn Tate, who's already got that in him. You put this around Alp, like that is what, that's what excites me about him. Well, among other things, but that really excites me about him. So I'm just happy that Houston's identity and culture is like, we're starting to see it built brick by brick, and that's exciting, especially because of how they've been portrayed. So do you want to, I don't know if you have any comments on that. If you do, feel free, but otherwise we can get to like the big picture of how Jabari fits in to the grand scheme of Rocket stuff of basketball. And then we can also touch on Tari Eason and TyTy.
Well, I love that you brought up the kind of the identity, the culture, right? That this is setting kind of the tone that these guys are going to be able to set for the team as a whole. Because we talked about this a lot last season, right? This was a main topic of discussion. Is like this Rockets team doesn't necessarily have an identity yet, and I think they may have just like they didn't stumble into it. Maybe they did stumble into it. Maybe Orlando did them a huge favor in this draft, right? We're going to see. It's going to take years for this draft to pan out, and we're going to be able to reflect back and be like, okay, what actually, like, did everybody walk away winners? Was this best case scenario for Orlando and for Houston, or was it a complete train wreck from one organization versus the other? Whatever. Right now, it feels like the Rockets have a newly established identity, right? Where all these guys are these hardworking grinders who are all going to be bought in towards one common goal, and that is just bettering themselves, growing as NBA players, working hard for what they want to achieve. And Jabari's got a very like selfless attitude about him, right? Like he's very like in all like in tons of his like media quotes with, right after the draft, right after the selection, all that. He was like, I just want to win, man. Like, I want to go out there and do whatever it takes to win. Like, he mentioned the fact that he wants to, rookie of the year would be cool, and like his goals for his career, championships, all-star appearances, whatever. But at the end, he said, but at the end of the day, it's about winning, right? It's about doing whatever it takes to win. I'm that kind of kid. That's exactly what my dad taught me growing up. Like, I just want to do whatever it takes to win. And I do think that he had one quote that is absolutely beautiful here that we haven't talked about yet. And the angle with Jabari is, look, this kid was supposed to go number 1 overall, right? Got all kinds of promises probably from Orlando that, hey, you're our guy. Remember, they rolled out like the red carpet for him. They had him doing media availability. They treated that man like a king when he was in Orlando for his pre-draft workout. He only worked out for Orlando and OKC, right? He didn't bother Houston, didn't do any of that. To then get passed up not only at number 1, but then to also get passed up by your safety net at number 2 with OKC. Like, this kid has a gigantic chip on his shoulder, and he was asked about that specifically right after being selected. Somebody asked him, talk about your mindset right now, having gone through the whole pre-draft process, and kind of what were your thoughts when the pick was announced. There was a lot of talk about you going number 1. Did it add a chip to you when you got the final result? Jabari said, definitely added a chip, but God makes no mistakes, so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be where I'm wanted. I'm happy to get to Houston and just show them, give them what they picked. Just happy to be here, right?
We got people who want to be here. John Wall, baby. Continue.
Shout out to John Wall of all people, who absolutely must respect the hell out of that quote. But yeah, like this is a guy that's gonna have a mountain of motivation to go out there and prove Orlando wrong, prove OKC wrong, prove the entire league wrong, that he should have been the #1 overall pick. The exact same mentality that Jalen Green used to fuel himself last year, right? Jalen Green was like, I think I'm the #1 pick in the draft. Like, I think I should be #1 overall. And some people kind of tried to misconstrue that, like, oh, he wants to be in Detroit. He doesn't want to be in Houston. No, no, no. Don't get it twisted. That's not the mentality. The mentality is he thinks he's the best player in the draft. And the best player in the draft should be #1 overall. So he used that fuel to, like, push himself, right? And for two guys like that, with Jalen Green and Jabari Smith, two guys who are going to absolutely pour in all the work, all the blood, the sweat, the tears to get to where they want to be, that is Houston Rockets' new culture. And it's going to be really exciting to see that develop over time.
Yo, like, I'm legitimately fired up about it, honestly. And that's no disrespect to Banchero. It's not like Banchero doesn't have that mindset, but for all the reasons you just explained, like, it's a big part of Jabari Smith's identity, right? So I'm fired up. And like, all of a sudden, man, you have Jalen Green and Jabari Smith defending on the perimeter. Jalen Green improved vastly as a perimeter defender throughout the season, right? And now you have these two. One of them's athletic, one of them's long and quick and versatile. Like, it's just awesome. And those are the cornerstones. And you have back-to-back #1 talents that the Rockets drafted at 2 and 3 respectively, that both carry a chip on their shoulder, although Jabari was done dirty. And Jalen wasn't like, Detroit didn't roll out the red carpet for Jalen and then hit him with the okey doke and the whoop de whoop, right? But Jabari was like, honestly, with Jabari and the Rockets, it's got to be one of those, like, I just imagine it being like, yo, this is awkward, but what's up? Like, hey,
straight up,
thought this was going to happen, but here we are. Look at us,
Orlando hoed Jabari, like, for real. Like, it was bad. And then not only that, I don't know if you saw, like, it took Paolo a minute to go on Twitter and be like, yo,
Paolo
Orlando, what's up?
Paolo had a stank face, dude. That man was not happy.
Not whatsoever. And a lot of people were like trying to point out that, like, Jabari also kind of had a stank face, but I think Jabari's was the reaction of like, yo, I thought I was going 1 or 2. Like, it wasn't disgust at being drafted by Houston. It was like he was promised 1 or 2, and that's what he thought was going to happen. So his was just like,
that's correct.
Go ahead.
No, that's correct. And to add on to that, Banchero's was the opposite, or not the opposite, but the alternative. Banchero's was like, oh, I want to be in Houston. I don't want to be in Orlando. Like, I thought I was going to Houston. I was ready to go to Houston.
So within all of that, like, I do think, like, their reactions on social media, right? Like, Jabari immediately, like, went to Twitter and was like, H-Town, what's up? Like, we're going to get this. Like,
love that, by the way.
And then later,
tweets, like, H-Town, let's get it. I love it. Yes.
Like, he's already buying it. And then later, when Tari Eason was selected, Jabari dropped another tweet. He was like, yo, Tari's in here, let's turn up, let's do this. And so I think, like, again, Jabari had dropped 2 tweets talking about the Rockets and how excited he was to be in Houston, and Paolo still hadn't said anything on social media about the Magic. So
Paolo said, I think he tweeted, Orlando, let's work. And then
I think Paolo's tweet came after that. Like, I'm just saying, like, Jabari was like quick to the trigger with it, like, trying to point.
I don't know when he sent it, but before we recorded this, I took a look, and
it feels like he's excited to be a Houston Rocket and excited to prove everybody wrong. And again, that's the type of chip you want on your shoulder with a young, exciting prospect who's eager to prove themselves and who has the work ethic he does. Like, if you got question marks about whether or not this kid's going to be able to add to his game, I think you should maybe put some of those question marks, on the back burner for a little bit, because I think he's got what it takes to truly develop and put the work in to get better.
And that shit is contagious. So that's what I love. That, like, it's contagious and it's infectious. So Jalen's got it. I've heard Josh has got it. Now Jabari's got it. Like, that's the type of environment that I hope helps Kevin Porter Jr. get it consistently. And it's just so nice to have a young talent, high-end talent, where you don't have to worry about any character concerns. I mean, after a couple years, like after Harden and dealing with, like, choking in the playoffs and, like, the strip club stuff and the out of shape in the summer, all that kind of stuff. And then going from that to, okay, Kevin Porter Jr. had this incident and this incident. Christian Wood's been this kind of, nomad with character issues. Like, I'm just so happy that we have a kid like Jalen Green, who is, so far has had no issues and seems to be a hard worker and a grinder, and now Jabari Smith, who seems the same thing. And I just love that he's focused on winning. Him and Jalen, like that I don't know. I'm fired up. That's how you set it up to go. And then you add Tari Eason. So let's talk about the basketball fit of Jabari Smith. So if it was Banchero and Şengün, people had a ton of worries about, can these guys play defensively together, right? Like, they're neither of them 7 feet tall. They're not known for their defense. Jabari's not 7 feet tall, by the way.
What are you working on, your back posture? Why did you like rise up all of a sudden? You cutting off your forehead on the camera and everything.
Sorry, I was slouching a little bit, so I want to get my back straight.
I'm gonna do it too. I'm gonna puff my chest out a little bit. Just right here.
I've been sitting a long time doing it. So I'm just trying.
I'm all slouched, man. I'm going through flu game. I'm like just gonna stay down here.
Trying to stretch my body out. But anyway, so with Banchero, like, you have those issues, those concerns, especially in pick and roll coverage. Can they both like switch off of that? Do you have like length, shot blocking, rim protection, all of that kind of stuff? And then on offense, how do they fit? They both need the ball. They both like to operate. One of them can drive and also post up. And Banchero, Şengün's going to want to post up or do the thing where, he's at the high post and waiting for cutters to go around. Is Banchero going to be that cutter? Banchero's not like a lob threat. He can be a lob threat, but not like your quintessential lob threat, right? So anyways, all these concerns and question marks around Şengün and Banchero, which, as I mentioned earlier, sucked because, like, look, if Banchero was going to be that star, then I understand having to part ways with Şengün if it was going to come to that, if we determined it really didn't fit. But I just hated thinking about that because I was so excited to see Şengün grow. So with Jabari, man, he spreads the floor, okay, which is perfect. He's an athlete. He's not like a Jalen type athlete, but he can cut and catch a dunk and finish it, especially with his length. He can catch and shoot very quickly, and he can also get buckets on his own from the block, right? Not like a traditional post up, but like I said, he can face up, hit you over the top. He can hit you with like a little bump and a step back fade and a quick shot. And so I just envision a basketball world where, for example, not every play, but for example, Şengün's on the post, KPJ's on the wing, running action, running off ball, cutting through. Jalen comes, either catches from the wing and then operates or does the same thing. Jabari's there for the kick out. Jayshawn Tate's there to cut back door if his defender sags off and sleeps, whatever it is, right? So you just have options. And like having that shooter, having Jalen Green, who's a good shooter, even though the percentages were wonky, I think he picked it up towards the latter half of the year. KPJ had a really good season shooting. So if he can continue that into next season, and then you add Jabari Smith now, and if maybe Alpi or Tate, just one of them, gets their shooting up to a respectable rate, like, that's a versatile, dynamic offense. And then on defense, man, he's switchable 2 through 5, long, or maybe 1 through 4, 2 through 5, maybe 1 through 5, maybe 3 through 5. I think Stone said he's going to want him switching 3 through 5. So he's going to have to maybe get a little stronger, right, to be able to guard like certain 5s down low. But versatile, switchable defender, immediately puts pressure on the ball, can get out in transition and run. Like, imagine Jalen Green and Jabari and Kevin Porter Jr. in transition, right? I'm not sure. Maybe Banchero can be dynamic in transition as well, but I guess I'll stop comparing them officially. But there's just so much to do. He can be he can be a complementary scorer. He can have games going off on his own. I think he's versatile. And at the very least, he's always going to bring it on the defensive end. So I just think the fit kind of makes things work, provides that spacing and that harmony that you need for offenses to work, to get that chemistry, to get that rhythm. And I think that it also gives you more length and more defense. I mean, dude, I think he blocked a shot per game at Auburn. I could be wrong about that, but I think he did. And Şengün blocked a shot per game this past season. So, I'm not saying we got Dikembe Mutombo on a back line or whatever, but like, you got guys that know how to block shots, right? That know how to play defense and pick the ball up and guard somebody on the ball, and they can block shots at the rim. Like, man, you put that next to Jalen Green's improved defense, Josh Chris, who over pursued a lot on defense individually, but like, if he understands the scheme, he's got all the instincts and the tools. Like, they might, Jayshawn Tate, who gets after it. Like, so I don't know. I don't want to overhype it because they're all very, very young. Oh, Eric Gordon, who's also switchable. They're very young, and I expect that immaturity to, continue to some degree. So I don't think they're going to all of a sudden start winning games, but they are talented on the floor. They are talented. And I think Jabari helps that maturity kind of rapidly expedited because he's going to set a tone and people are going to match that tone. That's how I view it, at least, obviously, without knowing them. But so I think it expedites that maturity, and they're going to have enough talent and like offensive firepower that I don't know. I could see a defense, not like a top 10 defense, but I could see a real defensive improvement coming just from the addition of Jabari Smith and Tari Eason, because it makes you so versatile basketball wise, so long, so switchable, so much more intense, so much more just high IQ on defense and like caring about defense, right? A lot of defenses caring about playing it and not taking the possession off and having the awareness and having the instincts. And man, both of those guys have that. So it's like, whoa, you inject it into the lineup with height, with length, and you keep the best parts of the lineup that you already had with the offensive versatility of Şengün, Jalen Green, hopefully taking that next step. And it's like, yo, I can't wait to watch this team. You get the hustle and the length of Garuba. Hopefully you add him in, sprinkle like 15 minutes off the bench. Like, I am excited to watch this team. And I think Jabari Smith immediately raises, like we talked about, he gives it an identity, he gives it character, right? And he just injects what he brings to the table into it seamlessly. And it seems like you just pick that up and keep going. So that's how I see it.
Everything that the Houston Rockets desperately lacked this last season, shooting, defense, size, they just injected like that exponentially with Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason.
Sorry, I know I just went on a rant. Let me just say this.
I was going to start snapping for you like at the end, but I can't actually snap. So like I can't like.
You don't know how to snap?
I can't do it. It doesn't work.
That's
My fingers are broken.
It's a weak snap, but it's a snap. Wait, so you can't do like the do your step?
Anyway, I cannot. I got to fake it.
That's unfortunate. So like let's imagine Kevin Porter Jr. has an off night or rolls his ankle, or you know, let's say for some unfortunate reason doesn't fix the issues and like storms off the court. Now it doesn't matter as much because you have Jabari Smith. You have someone else that can shoulder the offensive load without doing it in like a manner like Christian Wood did, while also keeping defense on the floor, right? And that excites me. And you could run like Jalen, Alp, Jabari Smith, and now Kevin Porter Jr. is like an added luxury. Hope, you know, if he hits the potential that we hope for, now it's like an added luxury that's awesome, right? So, and then I think it also opens Tate up a little more. It gives Tate a guy that he can reliably probably drive and expect to cut, or drive and kick to, who can make him look good and just rise up and shoot over a contested three-pointer. It just spreads things out, dude. It's awesome. So sorry. And then let's also transition. Let's get to Tari Eason as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the two are kind of one and the same in the sense of like a lot of these skills and a lot of the benefits that Jabari Smith Jr. brings, you're getting a lot of that out of Tari Eason. Like they're not clones of each other by any stretch of the imagination, but all the same talking points that we just hit on Jabari Smith about the versatility on defense, how he complements this young core, how he's going to be able to play. Tari Eason checks a lot of those exact same boxes, which is why it's insane that the Rockets were able to walk away with both of them in one draft. Like, you know, watching the picks kind of count down as we got close to 17 and then realizing that the Rockets were going to basically have their choice between the two of Tari Eason or AJ Griffin. Like, that was absurd to get all the way down to pick 17 and have that type of a choice presented in front of you. And for them to go Tari Eason, he was always my pick for the Rockets at 17. Like, I just was praying that he would make it all the way down there. From a basketball perspective, I do think that, you know, the way Stone kind of referenced Tari Eason is he talked about the fact that defensively, he called him a defensive playmaker, which I think is a great way to describe Tari Eason's game, right? He's a guy who can make a difference defensively and you know, in a way generate you some offensive opportunities by being so disruptive on defense. And Stone immediately said that this is a guy that is going to, you know, down the line be able to guard 1 through 5 legitimately, right? And we throw that term around a lot, like, oh, this guy can guard 1 through 5. There's very few players that can legitimately guard 1 through 5. Like, it's really hard to find a guy who can guard legit any point guard in the league and any 5 in the league. Because, again, we throw that term around a lot and it gets overused. I think Tari fits that bill, though. He's got all the physical gifts needed to guard the bigger bigs and also keep up with the smaller ones. So imagining that level of defensive versatility slotted next to Alperen Şengün, or playing as a small ball 5 next to a Jabari Smith, or if the Rockets want to go super sizable, right, and have, you know, supersize me and have Jabari Smith at the 3, Tari at the 4, and Alp at the 5, like they've got so much versatility on the floor with their lineups, what they want to run out, they want to play small, they want to play big, all of it is at their disposal this upcoming season. And I know we're not going to get like a full-blown picture of it in Summer League. We're going to get like a brief glimpse at some of the different things that these guys can bring to the table. But the idea of, again, what some of these guys are going to look like playing alongside Jalen, KPJ, Alpi, all that, it is so tantalizing to think about, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, last season they were small. Tice was 6'8".
They've been small for a long time, dude. Like let's keep it a
Yeah,
buck, right?
yeah,
Like they've been
yeah,
small since they traded Clint Capella, essentially.
basically, and they were pretty small even with Clint. It was just Clint who was tall. Everyone else was, small height wise, at least relative to the NBA. So yeah, last season they ran KPJ 6'5", Jalen Green 6'6", Jayshawn Tate 6'4", Christian Wood 6'10", but couldn't play big, so the 6'10ness was a bit negated. Daniel Tice 6'8" when he did play. Eric Gordon 6'3", Dennis Schroeder 6'1", like KJ Martin 6'6". They were not a big team at all, right? And so all of a sudden you have Jabari Smith. Oh, and then Alperen Sengun played 6'9". We'll bump him up to 6'10" just to be homers. Jabari Smith 6'10", Tari Eason 6'8". Like you just add 6'10" and 6'8". They didn't have that, right? And both guys have long arms, right? Tari Eason 6'8", 7'2" wingspan. Like that's
But you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about your point with C Wood. C Wood couldn't play big, right? 6'10" frame, sure, did not play big. Jabari knows how to play big if he's guarding a bigger player. Tari knows how to play big if he's guarding a bigger player. So we're not talking about having like legit 7-footers like lumbering around down low, but these are guys who know how to play big, and that's what plays into what makes them so enticing as versatile defensive prospects.
Yeah, I agree. So like imagine a lineup. Let's forget the offensive side of things, just for just for discussion's sake. But Jabari Smith 6'10", Tari Eason 6'8", Jalen Green at 6'6", Jayshawn Tate at 6'4", and Eric Gordon at 6'3". All those guys are switchable. They're sturdy, except for Jalen Green at the moment. They're tough, like they're physical, right? Like last season, they had one guy that two guys you could take, Jayshawn Tate and Eric Gordon, but Eric Gordon wasn't playing enthusiastic defense because the team sucked, which I don't blame him, but he's the kind of guy that could flip a switch if you actually have a competitive team. But they had 2+ defenders, eye test, not metrics. Screw defensive metrics. 2 eye test plus defenders in Jayshawn Tate and Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon, I'm going to call him a neutral. Jayshawn Tate, they had 1+ defender in Jayshawn Tate, right? And then Jalen Green, I think, became one towards the end of the season. But now you have 2+ defenders added to the squad, Jabari Smith and Tari Eason, in addition to Jayshawn Tate, who knows who they – and in addition to Usman Garuba, if he gets playing time, because he didn't really play last season, right? And I think he's a plus defender. He was a little slow on his feet at times, but he started picking it up toward the end of the season and showing how he uses his length, how he's physical on boards and things like that, and how he can block shots as well. So like we talked about, the identity changes. Having a guy like Tari Eason, who's 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan that can switch probably 1 through 5, probably at least 1 through 4. If he can just hit 35% from 3, we're good. If he can hit 35% from 3, he's going to be starting at the 3 at some point in this season, unless Silas is tripping. Now, he very well may not. He very well may be like 27% from 3, right? I think he's the type where it's going to take a second for him to adjust, but I think he's going to be so useful on defense, and I think he's going to be able to utilize on his slashing ability to negate for the fact, or to make up for the fact that he cannot shoot, right? So I don't know. I think he's going to be impactful. I think it's going to be one of those scenarios where Silas is hesitant to play him because he's got these vets that play like similar positions, and he's got this log jam at guard, and he's going to have to figure out how to juggle the minutes and whatever. But once he gets to playing him, I think we're going to see, and he's also the type of player, given his shooting inconsistencies and given the fact that he's a rookie and there's a learning curve, he might even be underwhelming if he's only given short minutes. Like if you see him for 5 minutes at a time or something, because he's not going to have a chance to like adjust. But once he gets the minutes and he adjusts, I think he's going to be very impactful. And then obviously we talked about Jabari Smith. So man, depending on how bad the rest of the West is, I don't think they're going to win more games, but I do think that they're going to start being more competitive. I think we're going to, at some point, I have to hope we're going to stop seeing those types of games where they just get blown out in the first quarter and it's over, like we'll see them, but not so frequently. I'm hoping.
Yeah, from an effort perspective, right? You're injecting so much more youth, a bunch of guys who want to try their absolute best, who are going to work, every possession that they're on the floor because they're trying to prove themselves, right? They're trying to establish themselves as NBA players. You're not going to have veterans out there who are, kind of going through the motions, as it were, because they're playing on a team that's very clearly rebuilding and doesn't match their timeline. You're also hopefully not going to have guys out there who are operating on their own agenda, right? Serving their own self-interests, going for their own buckets, whatever, not necessarily playing team basketball or team-oriented basketball because it just doesn't matter because they're just out there to try and get their own so they can focus on getting their next big payday, whatever, which is a lot of what we saw, again, Eric Gordon at times going through the motions, Christian Wood, self-serving interests at times, which, again, that mentality, just like we talked about the mentality that Jabari Smith Jr. brings, the tone setting, the hard work mentality, all of that, just like that's infectious, the negative mentality is also infectious from guys like that who are maybe a little bit mentally checked out, or guys who are maybe, just trying to focus on getting theirs because they don't really care about, what the direction the team is headed. So to replace that, and I don't want to throw Eric Gordon under the bus here, right? Because he has bought into like the veteran mentorship role and all that. It's just, you're not going to expect a vet, at the age of Eric Gordon to give 110% every single possession. There were games, right, where like EG carried when he needed to, right, where he would like get bucket after bucket offensively and come up as like the safety net for this young baby Rockets team. Like the, comeback on the road against Atlanta, like EG was big that game, I believe, if I'm not misremembering. He had plenty of possessions where like when he wanted to, right, you said it earlier, flip a switch, turn it on immediately. He just, would sometimes kind of walk through the possessions if it wasn't like dire circumstances, like we need to stop right now, that kind of thing. But I do think we need to talk a little bit about the acquisition made, which was absolutely insane, as part of what was originally assumed, to be the framework of the Christian Wood deal with the Dallas Mavericks. The Rockets managing to trade back from pick 26 down to pick 29 via the Minnesota Timberwolves, where they then selected TyTy Washington, and also recouped 2 additional future second-round draft picks. Now, unfortunately, we don't know the specifics yet on those future second-round draft picks, unfortunately, because the trade has not been finalized yet. We just don't know the specifics. We weren't able to ask Rafael Stone that question in his post-draft media availability because it's not final yet. But we do know that they're getting those 2 future assets. And we kind of, briefly touched on it earlier, but that return overall for Christian Wood, a guy that you essentially we're going to have to jettison to make space for one of these top 3 big man prospects in the first place. Now you're looking at the total return of being the $4 million traded player exception, the 29th overall pick, which is now TyTy Washington, who is an obscene get at pick 29. Like, as he kept like falling down the draft board and was still there, I was excited that the Rockets were maybe going to take him at 26, and then they traded back, and I was like, oh, well, there goes TyTy Washington, and yet he was still there at 29. So huge win for the Rockets with that selection.
Kentucky guard.
Right, like Kentucky, like we need people to stop doubting Kentucky guards. He's gonna work out great. And I honestly don't know why.
I'm sure John Wall is thrilled about that.
Yeah, in fact, apparently at the draft combine, TyTy Washington mentioned that he hadn't actually spoken to the Rockets at the combine, I believe, but that he had discussed with John Wall, like there was a connection, a relationship there. So, and look, at the end of the day, the Rockets have done relatively right by John Wall. Like they've kept him included in the decision-making process. They were on the same page about him sitting out in the first place, and he's getting a payday, right? And I'm sure they're going to try and work on a buyout situation for him. He recently opted into his contract. We're not going to spend too much time discussing that because it was basically a given that he was going to opt in. I'd expect the Rockets to try and, orchestrate a buyout with him. But if John Wall's talking up the Rockets organization to a guy like TyTy Washington, a potential prospect, then it seems to me that they're still on good terms. There's not really any bad blood there. But that trade, that acquisition for draft night, I mean, Roosh, I come away thinking that this was an absolute success if you're the Rockets and Rafael Stone, and you can walk away from this draft feeling incredibly excited about the future.
Look, man, Rafael Stone should be patting himself on the back. I think he's taken a lot of heat for a variety of situations, and I think the dust is slowly settling. It hasn't fully settled, so we'll see. But I think the dust is beginning to settle, and you're beginning to see the vision that the Rockets front office had slowly coming to fruition. Look, turning Christian Wood, it was previously just a first-round pick, a bunch of expiring contracts, I think 3 of 4 of which the Rockets were going to waive, if I'm not mistaken, and a $4 million TPE I don't even know what the fuck. Sorry, I don't know what it stands for, but $4 million TPE. But regardless, they turned that into the
Come
same
on,
thing.
come on, bro. You're just disrespectful to all the cap experts out
I
there.
know.
Traded player exception.
Traded player. I was like, what order does it go in? I'm too tired. TPE. And so, anyways, they expanded to get 2 extra second round picks, right? And I think if you look at the value that Detroit got for Jeremy Grant, I think it's pretty similar. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's pretty similar to the point where it's like you can't really complain about that. I don't think Detroit generated a TPE, a traded player exception, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But regardless, it's like, yo, they got market value. And I mean, frankly, I think Jeremy Grant is objectively a better player than Christian Wood. No disrespect to Christian Wood. I just think Jeremy Grant makes an impact on both ends of the ball. Christian Wood's got more offensive talent for sure, but I think Jeremy Grant's close enough and more impactful on defense, close enough on offense and more impactful on defense to where he's a better player. And their return was relatively the same. So Rafael Stone gets TyTy Washington, combo guard, can play point guard. I think he's 6'3", has a Nathan Fogg said 6'10" wingspan, but I saw 6'8" wingspan, but still that's pretty sweet.
It was reported 6'8" from the combine, so let's go with that one.
So we'll go with that. KOC mocks him up similar to Emmanuel Quickly. I saw one website say Andre Miller, which is interesting. Not sure about that. And then there was another one. I saw one compare him to Jalen Brunson, which would be an optimistic, nice high end. But TyTy Washington, Kentucky guard. Look, the Rockets need a point guard. They don't know what's going to happen with Kevin Porter Jr. quite yet. Josh Christopher's a combo guard. Dacian Nix is waiting in the wings, but I think he's still got a long way to go to being, a starter. And so TyTy Washington could all of a sudden be somebody that could help fill a role if guys are injured or if guys get traded or whatever it may be. So I'm excited about that. I think he's a guy that could have gone much higher, could have gone top 15, I would say. I think that his injury hurt him because he tried to come back and play, after being injured, and his stats took a dip. I feel like if he would have just sat after his injury and not played again, he would have been taken higher and valued higher. And I think I heard he was hurt in one of the workouts, like mildly hurt in one of the workouts, and that kind of held him back. So I'm not sure about all that, just things that I've heard passing that along, but great value pick at 29. And they traded down, like they took Wendell Brown, and people were kind of confused, and then boom, flipped it for two second round picks, moved down, get a guy that a lot of people wanted, who, like I said, was a top 15 talent in TyTy Washington. I mean, the Rockets cleaned up in the draft. I gave him an A+ because this was my argument. I said if you consider the things that were out of their control, right? Because they had, unless you wanted them to trade up for Banchero, which I'm glad they didn't. By the way, props to Rafael Stone. Your eyes, you're like, what? Props to Rafael Stone for standing pat and not letting the Magic bully him and make him look stupid. I think I can't really make sense of what Orlando was doing, but I feel like at the last minute they were like, you know what? I'm cool with Banchero, and I bet Houston will give us something. So let's just take Banchero because we think he could arguably be the best player available, and let's make Houston bite.
You know what's and you know what's crazy about that logic? So one, yes, you're absolutely right. Like Rafael Stone didn't start like shaking in his boots and freaking out and panic and hit the panic button and cough up the 17th pick or something and forfeit future draft capital or whatever to move up 2 slots. Not only did he not panic, but how crappy of a thing would that be to do if you were Orlando, to draft Banchero and then try to some strong arm move to then flip his draft rights down to Houston for Jabari, like after you made this whole hubbub about taking him number 1 overall, he's your guy, all that. Like, what kind of a message would you be sending to the guy that you eventually would hope to be like the face of your franchise moving forward, trying to draft your franchise cornerstone type piece that you think is going to be, there for years to come? Like, that's a terrible start to that relationship if that was the move that they were ultimately going for. I will chime in as well. I want to take a slight victory lap because draft lottery night, when it was announced that Orlando had the number 1 overall pick, everybody was like, oh, Jabari to Orlando, it's going to happen, like all this. And I was like, no, pump the brakes a little bit. Like, Paolo to Orlando makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. Namely, they don't have, like, at the top of the draft, you look at Jabari and Chet as like the kind of a little bit more so like the ancillary pieces, right? The complementary pieces. They fill very, specific skill set needs, that kind of thing. Whereas Paolo and Jaden Ivey are like the bucket getters, right? You put the ball in their hands, they're going to go generate you offense, create for themselves, create for others. And so in my mind, I was like, Orlando doesn't have that guy yet. Like OKC has that guy. OKC has two of those guys in SGA and Josh Giddey, guys who put the ball in their hands. They're going to generate offense. The Rockets have a couple of those guys in Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün already, but Orlando doesn't have that guy. So to me, Banchero made a ton of sense in Orlando, and that was my immediate reaction to the draft lottery. And it's crazy to see how that's actually the direction that it panned out.
I completely agree with you too. I just believe the noise because, I mean, Woj doesn't usually miss like that, right? So, but I agree with you. It's like they don't have that super high-end talent that can create with the ball in their hands. And so Banchero to them should be a dream. Like I remember thinking like, yo, he's 6'10" without shoes. That means he's probably 6'11" plus in shoes, and he can score and create and could potentially become a really good defender. Like, why is he so out of consideration for the number one based on everything we've heard? So, yeah, really, really awful way, honestly, to start that relationship. I mean, obviously, as we talked about it, Jabari looked visibly spurned. Banchero looked visibly disgusted. So just a terrible way to start things off. Really will be interesting to see how that relationship evolves over time. If Banchero is like, yo, this is a joke, or if they, if it's water under the bridge and no one cares. We'll see. But
Banchero's going to Steve Francis it. I don't want to play for Orlando.
I mean, he might, right? So, but it's crazy because, let's say Rafael Stone would have caved and given up 17, then you get Banchero, and that's what you get. Banchero and then maybe TyTy Washington versus Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, and TyTy Washington. So it's kind of interesting to think. But look, the Rockets did not give up any assets. They gained assets. But this is what I was going to say. I was giving the grade. That's what I was doing. A+, because they got the best player available at every position they drafted at. 317, 26, moving back to 29. I would have said TyTy was the best on the board. So at both spots. So they got the best player available. If you take out the things that are not in their control, like Orlando making that last minute switch to Banchero, if you believe Banchero is the best player available only, they got the best player available at 3. They got the best player available to me at 17, Tari Eason. And then they got the best player available in TyTy Washington. Not only did they get the best player available, they got the best fit available at each position. So they got two birds with one stone, because best fit does not always translate to best player. And I'm sorry, that's wrong. I got that backwards. I misremembered my own argument. So they got the best player available. They got the best fit at each position. All that's correct. And then they also addressed needs with Jabari Smith and with Tari Eason. So what I was going to say is addressing your needs is not always synonymous with getting the best fit, right? Someone could fit well in your offense and still not address like a defensive concern that you have, for example, right? So they got best player available at each spot. They got the best fit available at each spot. And in the process of doing so, they addressed very significant needs and concerns with shooting, defense, size, and length. So, and they walked away with additional assets with those 2 second-round picks that they previously did not have that could potentially be used as sweeteners in, like, I don't know, like an Eric Gordon trade or something, right? You could see like Eric Gordon in a second-round pick for Minnesota for whatever the Eric Gordon haul is. And it's like that second-round pick is what, the cherry on top, or not the cherry on top, what took it over the top, for example. So don't underestimate the value of these assets and the haul that the Rockets got. I mean, I really don't think it could have gone better given all things considered. So Rafael Stone, I think, has something to hang his hat on. Amazing draft haul in back-to-back seasons, drafted a superstar potentially with Jalen Green, drafted what we expect to be an amazing player in Jabari Smith. Tari Eason addresses the need, gets the best player available, injects athleticism into the Rockets, and then comes away with additional assets. So, and then also the other big news of the night, and if you have any other thoughts, please let me know and cut me off, but Rafael Stone should additionally be patting himself on the back, because it looks like the gamble he made trading James Harden is slowly starting to pay off.
Well, it's important to note, right, before we dive into the big news, right, Tari Eason was the first, tangible result of the James Harden trade, because that 17th pick by way of the Brooklyn Nets, I mean, we kind of were operating on the assumption that the first few years of these picks and swaps would be, incredibly late first-round draft picks at best, right? Because, oh my goodness, Brooklyn Nets, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, they're going to be a top seed every year, wreck and shop, competing for chips, all of that. And the hope was that Over time, they would diminish, get older, whatever, and then the picks on the back end would be nice and juicy. That is now accelerated, a word that we used a crap ton earlier talking about the Rockets, but that
We
timeline
said
is now
we said expedited, but they are synonymous.
expedited,
They are
accelerated.
synonymous.
There we go.
And I like a good change of verbiage, but continue.
Right, but it's the timeline is now accelerated because James Harden didn't work out in Brooklyn, and now we've got the big news that we're going to hit. Go for it.
Pop that tweet up. Kyrie Irving, according to Shams, Kyrie Irving is expected to find a new home. He's expected to find a team other than Brooklyn to end up. And as a result of that, or at least reported in connection with that, if you have the tweet, Jackson, put it up, please. Kevin Durant's future is now up in the air in Brooklyn, despite having 4 years left on his contract. So all of a sudden, Brooklyn is in a situation where, whoa, KD and Kyrie and James Harden didn't work out. KD and Kyrie might now be split. KD might even leave. They might be stuck with the Ben Simmons poo-poo platter that people wanted the Rockets to take, which is honestly, I mean,
That's
I just
ironic, right?
realized that.
Is that the right use of irony?
I would say that's ironic because the Rockets traded James Harden for a package that people thought was shit, and it turns out that package is now better than the alternative package, and the team that traded that package to them that was thought to be shit has the shit package. So I would call that irony. Maybe not pure irony, but I think it's definitely a form or genre of irony, regardless. So if that's the case, all of a sudden Brooklyn is looking at a situation where they're stuck and they have no draft capital. If they have to trade Kevin Durant, you would imagine they're going to get a ton of draft capital back, and so they can make moves with that. But they're not going to control their own draft. They're going to be like the Rockets when they gave a lot of control of their draft over to OKC in the Chris Paul Russell Westbrook trade, and then having to rework to recoup those assets, right? And so we've seen how bad the Rockets have been over the last 2 seasons as they've been trying to rebuild from that. Imagine if the Nets are in that situation and you get a swap and a first out of it. That would be a swap with the number 2 overall pick, theoretically, if they end up as bad as the Rockets have been, and then you'd get the 3rd pick outright. That would be insane, right? And that's only 2 of the years. We have control through 2027. So if it goes amok in any of those years, boom, positive news for the Rockets. So if I'm Houston's front office, I'm celebrating right now. I mean, you've improved the team, I think, in a material and serious and significant way. You've drafted 2 players that could potentially be starters for the next however many years in a Houston Rockets uniform. And you just used 1 asset from the James Harden trade. You have many more to go. And it's looking like the gamble you made might be paying off a lot earlier than anyone had predicted. Or maybe it's going exactly according to plan as the Rockets expected. And James Harden is like the mole who was just sent in to blow it up and just destroy it and, do Houston a solid. But either way, I mean, I am ecstatic. Like, I'm excited. After tonight, I can't wait for the season to start. I am so excited for Summer League, to go see these guys in the flesh. I don't know. It's all exciting.
Yeah, no, this is an amazing time to be a Houston Rockets fan. And again, I know that some fans were maybe a little bit taken aback by the Paolo Banchero selection happening, and kind of throwing a gigantic wrench into everybody's kind of pre-plan. Oh, good. I made it through the whole show.
I'll mute yourself. I got you while you figure it out. I will say, to kind of add on to this point, like, you could look at a team like the Knicks. Like, Knicks fans are pissed right now at how the Knicks operated, and the Knicks have not had a talent like Jalen Green drafted. I don't think they've had a talent like Jabari Smith drafted. I mean, I'll take that back. If RJ Barrett is the truth, then they have RJ Barrett. But in all these years of being awful, it's been pretty much RJ Barrett, at least that I can remember. So the Rockets have Jalen Green. They have Jabari Smith. If the Kevin Porter Jr. gamble, which is essentially playing with house money, if that pays off, crazy. Alperen Şengün, whom they moved up to draft, like, let's see what he becomes. They have to be really proud of the job that they've done in such a short amount of time. And I think fans should be appreciative and happy. And like you said, it's a good time to be a Rockets fan because you're not, so far at least, you're looking at a competent organization operating incompetent in a competent fashion, right? You're not looking at the Kings or the Knicks where you're just constantly questioning, like, man, what are these guys doing? Drafting Keegan Murray, not even trading the pick for extra assets, whatever, right? So I think we should be happy about that, man. And it's got me excited, and I think it's got a lot of fans excited as well. Are you good now?
Yeah, apparently, I think I'm back now. God, I made it through the whole show. I was muting myself when I had to cough, like all that good stuff, and then I start the sentence 3 words in, and I just immediately lose my shit. What a way to end the podcast, right? No, I mean, you echo the sentiment there, right? The point that I was going to make was essentially right. I know that some fans are going to be kind of, in the mourning period about Paolo Banchero not being a Houston Rocket, but it's important to remember that whatever direction the Rockets went with that number 3 pick, whether it was Paolo, whether it was Jabari, whether it was Chet, they were going to walk away with another top tier, like tier 1 talent in subsequent drafts. And when you're looking at an organization like the Rockets who managed to say, all right, we were in competition for years. We were at the top of the NBA pecking order for years during the James Harden era. How do we reset this and do it cleanly, right? They could have been stuck on the treadmill of mediocrity, right? Ownership could have placed a mandate on Rafael Stone and say, no, you know what? We want to make it to the playoffs this year. We've been in the playoffs. We want to keep doing that. Go trade for Ben Simmons. He's the guy that's going to get us to the playoffs. And they could have been a middling 7-8 seed with, John Wall, Ben Simmons, Christian Wood, like some, messy combination of those guys. This entire rebuilding process could have gone so sideways so quick. But time and time again, Rafael Stone and the Rockets front office, with the backing of the ownership, have made the right decisions and have been able to rebuild the right way, right? Because at the NBA level, I think it's very clear the best way to rebuild is to just bottom out, right? Bottom out, get a couple top draft picks, mortgage your established star players for assets and hit that rebuild button and see what happens and hope you hit on a couple guys in the draft, which it apparently looks like the Rockets, we know we have hit on one with Jalen Green. He looks every bit, to be a future superstar at the NBA level. Jabari Smith Jr., incredibly high ceiling, right? He's going to be an amazing player in the NBA. So you got 2 cornerstone level talents. You got a steal of the draft with Alperen Şengün. You've got other young, exciting, driven talent in Josh Christopher, Usman Garuba, Tari Eason, TyTy
KJ
Washington.
Martin, if he stays.
Yeah, KJ Martin, TBD. We didn't really talk about that a whole lot, and we're running out of time, so we'll just TBD on KJ Martin. Obviously, we'll keep you posted on our next episode and see what happens there. But the Rockets have really done a fantastic job with all of this. This could have been an absolute train wreck where you're just not confident about the organization moving forward. They're making moves to try and stay competitive. And the place you don't want to be in the NBA, right, is you want to be at the top or you want to be at the very bottom. You do not want to be in NBA purgatory, in that middle ground, stuck in limbo where you're competing as a 7 to 10 seed every single year with no clear direction of how to move up or how to truly bottom out. Ultimately, right now, like an organization that's actually historically done a pretty good job of this, but as of late kind of hasn't, the Spurs. They're kind of stuck in purgatory right now. They haven't been bad enough to get a top asset, but they also haven't been good enough to make a ton of noise and make their way back to the playoffs with DeJounte Murray and company. So that's kind of tough because they don't have the resources and the assets to jettison themselves back into upper echelon competition.
And why were they in the upper echelon to begin with?
Because they bottomed out and got a top pick.
Exactly. We can skip the David Robinson era and just start with Tim Duncan, even though they were very good and competitive with David Robinson before Tim Duncan. But regardless, Tim Duncan, 1997, I think he retired in, was it 2015? So let's say 14, 15. No, they won in 14. I think he retired in 15. So 18 years of relevance because they got that one guy, right? And then all of a sudden they don't have that guy anymore. Well, they had Kawhi actually, and then they fumbled the hell out of that situation and they lose him. So they don't have that top end talent and they're stuck, right? Like Dejounte Murray, how far is Dejounte Murray going to take you if you don't surround him with bona fide talent? I would much rather be the Rockets right now than the Spurs, without question. And you reference NBA purgatory, which I think is a nod to the article from Tim McMahon recently. And if you read the article, man, look, you have no choice, I think, so far, but to give credit to Tillman and to the Fertittas in general. Patrick Fertitta was quoted in that article. They say the right things, right? I mean, they seem to understand the vision and they seem to be trusting Rafael Stone. And Rafael Stone probably sold the vision because he understands how this goes. You gotta get premium assets. And threading the needle between being a good team and getting premium assets is very difficult. The Rockets were able to land James Harden and skip all of that, right? That doesn't happen all the time. Like you got to have great timing and a pretty significant amount of luck to pull something like that off. So if you can't, especially after you lose all your assets in the Russell Westbrook Chris Paul trade and then gain some of them back in the Nets trade before actually realizing some of those assets, right? Because it's going to take them a while to vest the way that you want. The only thing you can do is create your own luck, and you do that by getting a top pick. So Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, trade for Kevin Porter Jr. might have found gold, might have struck gold there. Use a couple relatively shitty assets in the Pistons protected pick and the Wizards protected pick to trade up and get Alperen Şengün, and boom, voila, you have a core in less than 18 months. James Harden was traded less than 18 months ago, and now you have a solid young core. Jayshawn Tate, signed him in the offseason. Draft Tari Eason, like Josh Christopher. Like, I mean, now how many of those people from the core, how many of those players from the core stick around over time? TBD remains to be seen, but there's a lot to be excited about. And people that aren't even Rockets fans, just objective analysts, are really thrilled about what the Rockets have done over the last 2 seasons. So it's a celebratory night. If Kyrie ends up, I don't know, I don't think we should waste time speculating on where he's going to go, how it's going to happen, because those details will be pouring out over the next few days, if not the next few weeks. And just follow Shams and Woj, because it's probably going to be going down. But if that blows up and the Rockets are able to get next season, it would be a pick swap. So like there's a scenario where the Rockets make and this is not very realistic, but the fact that it's even potentially somewhat theoretically possible should be amazing. At least it is to me. There's a scenario where the Rockets maybe make the play in and the Nets bottom out and get them like, a lotto pick or like a top 5 pick or whatever. And they can swap that pick. I don't think it's going to, if things, never say never, because James Harden got traded and I didn't think it was going to happen so quickly. I would be astonished if the Nets trio blew up within literal months after only playing like less than 50 games together. That would be one of the, I think, craziest, most fumbled bags probably in all of NBA history, especially after the whole Garnett-Pierce thing that birthed Boston's duo. And by the way, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, not quite the same, but like you can see some of the similarities. I made some comparisons to Jaylen Brown with Jabari Smith, only in theory, isolated, not in actual like practice. So we'll see. And Jalen Green's not as tall as Jason Tatum, nor is he the defender quite yet, but like offensive forces, right? Jalen Green probably would have been much better offensively in the finals against the Warriors. That's a tangent, but regardless, now you see how it all comes together, and like they could take full advantage of those Brooklyn picks, and this thing could really, really get rolling in like 24 months, So maybe not. The odds would probably say not, but the fact that they've steered back to this position and, they've been criticized, they've held firm, they've had their vision, and you got to give them credit. They've stuck to it, right? They don't they could have caved to public pressure and media pressure and sentiment and all that and taken the Ben Simmons bullshit, right? They didn't. They could have, I don't know, not drafted Jalen Green, or they could have traded out of 2 or tried to trade up for 1 and forfeit assets, or they could have done it again here. They traded up to get Banchero, whatever, right? But they've held firm to their vision. They've kind of, I think, put the league on notice that they've got this like way of doing things, and they're not going to be altered or faltered in any manner or fashion, right? And like the Rockets, they're not back, but they're on their way back. And I think slowly we'll be taken more seriously pretty soon here. So
they've put themselves in an optimal position to succeed, right? Whether or not that success actually comes, whether or not these pieces all mesh, and whether or not they start to coalesce at the right time and they are ascend back to relevancy and grind their way up, play in, then maybe next year like low playoff seed, then top seed, home court advantage, whatever. Whether that like linear growth happens, TBD. But they are putting themselves in the position to be successful and to grow something. Homegrown talent here in Houston, draft picks that were made by the Houston Rockets, which is kind of weird to think about because the last era that didn't really happen, right? It was a lot of transplant talent from other teams. Obviously, James Harden being at the very core of that. But that's kind of a cool, that's especially when you look at the two teams in the finals, right? All the homegrown talent that the Celtics have, all the homegrown talent that the Warriors have. Like the Rockets could be that next potential NBA dynasty where you look at their team 10 years from now and you're like, yo, they drafted all these guys and they stayed in Houston and they kept the core together and they kept putting the right pieces around them because they had a smart guy at the helm who's making the right moves at the margins and figuring out how to keep the pipeline of young talent streaming and how to keep players happy, all of that. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but it's a good time to be a Rockets fan. That's where we should end things. Please, you give your final point and carry us out because I've got no more voice left. I'm on E.
Okay. Fine. Listen, it's totally fine to feel like that. That's the excitement. I just wanted to bring up Phoenix because we've talked about different models and examples. If you're on YouTube watching us, you're seeing Jackson basically choke himself out over there, and I'm taking him over the edge, so that's my fault. But I want to get this point in because I'm so freaking excited. So we talk about like Phoenix and Atlanta and how they organically draft and have these stars and it all works out. And that's the model you want to, go after Boston, whatever. Look at Phoenix. They had Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Bridges, and Cameron Johnson, right? Those were like all homegrown guys that played instrumental roles in getting them to the finals. And in that year where I don't know what their record was, in the COVID year, let's see, 2020.
It was bad, but then they went 8-0 in the bubble, which is what was absurd.
Right. But that's my point, right? Is that their record was 34-39 in the COVID year. And they won. So they were 26-39 before going on the 8-game winning streak, which is actually, I mean, if the Rockets won 34 games, I'd be like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. But the point is, the year before that, they lost a lot more games. And the year before that, they lost a lot more games. Then all of a sudden, they win 34 games. And then they trade for Chris Paul and, like, boom, make the finals. Now, I'm not predicting or saying that's going to happen, but we have a batch of guys now that could potentially be your homegrown, core. You have Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith. If Kevin Porter Jr. sticks around, Kevin Porter Jr., even though he wasn't drafted by the Rockets, but might as well have been, Josh Christopher, Tari Eason, then you can extend it on to Usman Garuba, KJ Martin, Jayshawn Tate, whoever ends up sticking around, right? But there's a ton of core pieces. And so you could see a world where they grow because it's not like that Phoenix team had, they had Ricky Rubio. I don't know who their other vets were. I can't remember, but they had like Ricky Rubio with the team that won 8 in a row in the bubble. And like Cameron Payne and Dario Saric coming off the bench, right? But then they trade for Chris Paul, then they get Jay Crowder, and that's it. That's like that quickly they turn things around, right? So that's kind of what in a best case scenario for the Rockets, that's what I see. Jalen Green takes off, kind of similar to Devin Booker. Alperen Şengün takes off. Kevin Porter Jr. comes into his own and figures things out. Jabari Smith is the truth, high floor, starts hitting his ceiling. Jayshawn Tate is gritty and scrappy, maybe staying around, maybe traded with some type of assets for something else. And like, man, you build this thing out. So let's be excited. Thanks for tuning in. Drop us a comment below, man. Let's keep this thing going. We appreciate everyone who's been commenting and listening and showing us love. Tweet at us. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you want to hear more of, whatever. I've enjoyed building this thing. Speaking of building from the ground up, we've been building this podcast from the ground up, and I think we're 7 or 8 or 9 episodes in now. So it's been a ton of fun, man. Let's keep it going. I'm going to be in the Summer League in 2 weeks, so hopefully I'll have some interesting things to report from Summer League. Go listen to the interview that I did with Tari Eason. We only had him for 25 minutes, so I had to do quick hitters, but I think we got a lot out of him, and you could really tell his mindset and like his approach and just kind of his character as a player. And we might get the video up soon on YouTube as well. But yeah, man, check it all out. Like, let's get this thing going. Go Rockets. And don't forget, State of the Rockets is the premier Houston Rockets podcast. Jackson, any last words?
Get me out of here.
All right, baby. That's it. We're out. Peace. Or double.